They say nobody ever goes to Pineview Animal Rescue unless they're desperate or in trouble. On that hot July morning, Luke Bennett felt like both. The sweat stuck to his back as he pushed open the metal gate, the Texas sun already glaring down like it was mad at him. The rescue sat on the edge of suburban Dallas, just far enough from the city that you could hear the cicadas instead of sirens. Luke clutched the court document. Mandatory community service, 100 hours, and tried to ignore the sour knot in his stomach. He'd only just turned 15, but to the world, Luke was already a lost cause. Trouble at school, trouble at home. Then juvie after one stupid mistake too many. Now, here he was, a last-chance kid sent to shovel dog poop and clean cages. The shelter smelled like bleach and wet fur, and every bark inside seemed to say, "You don't belong here." Mrs. Randall, the shelter's director, met him at the door. She was wiry, with a sharp jaw and gray hair pulled into a tight bun, but her eyes softened just a bit when she saw Luke's faded jeans and bruised knuckles. "You're Luke Bennett?" she asked, clipboard in hand. He nodded, silent, used to people looking right past him. She led him through the kennels, barking and whining echoing off the walls. "We run a tight ship here, Luke. Animals come first. You follow directions, you'll get along fine. But I'm not babysitting you, understand?" He nodded again, swallowing his nerves. She paused in front of the last run. The air felt colder here, heavy. Inside the chain-link enclosure sat a massive German shepherd, dark fur mottled with old scars, his ears low and eyes so intense they seemed to look straight through you. The plaque on his kennel just said, "Chief, caution." "Stay back from the bars," Mrs. Randall warned. "That's Chief. Most folks are scared of him, and with good reason. He's bitten 2 handlers and a vet tech. We're out of options. If he can't show improvement, he'll be put down by the end of the month." Luke stared at Chief, and Chief stared right back. There was something almost human in the dog's gaze, a flicker of pain, of warning. For a heartbeat, the noise of the shelter faded, and it was just the two of them, 2 creatures that nobody wanted. Mrs. Randall sighed. "He's our lost cause, but you'll see to the chores in this wing. Feed, water, clean, and don't get any ideas about playing hero. If Chief even growls, you call for help." She left him with gloves, a mop, and a list of tasks. The other dogs barked for attention, wagging their tails, but Chief stayed perfectly still, eyes never leaving Luke. Something about that gaze made Luke's chest tighten, a feeling he'd fought to bury for years. He worked in silence, cleaning cages, dumping bowls, and keeping a wary distance. When he reached Chief's run, the shepherd bristled, lips curling back just enough to show a row of yellowed teeth. Luke kept his hands steady. "Easy, boy. I'm just here to clean," he muttered, voice barely above a whisper. Chief's tail thumped once, more warning than greeting. For the rest of the shift, Luke avoided the dog's run, but as he was leaving, he heard shouting from the back. 2 volunteers were trying to move Chief to the outdoor pen, but the dog froze, trembling, then snapped at the leash as soon as one reached for his collar. The volunteers jumped back, cursing. "He's hopeless," one spat. "Just put him down already." Luke watched, heart pounding. He knew that look. Panic, not anger. He'd seen it in his own reflection. The flinch before a blow, the tense shoulders waiting for something bad. "That's not a bad dog," he thought. "That's a scared one." On the ride home, the foster care van was silent except for the old radio crackling. Luke sat in the back, staring at the passing strip malls, wondering how much worse his summer could get. That night, in the cramped bedroom of his new foster home, he tried to forget about Chief. But he couldn't shake the dog's haunted eyes, or the way the shelter staff had given up on him. The world was full of people like that. People who decided you were worthless and never bothered to ask why. The next morning, Luke arrived early. Mrs. Randall met him with a grunt. "Didn't expect you back this soon," she said, eyeing him sideways. He shrugged. "Couldn't sleep." She smiled, just a little. Most kids wouldn't come back at all. In the kennels, Chief watched him, silent as always. Luke pulled up a stool, sitting a good 6 feet from the bars. "I get it," he whispered. "You don't trust anyone. I don't either." Minutes ticked by. Luke pulled a battered library book from his backpack and began to read aloud, his voice low and steady. At first, Chief ignored him, but after a while the big dog's head tilted, ears twitching. Luke read on, telling the story of a boy lost in the woods, fighting to find his way home. For a moment, something shifted. Chief crawled to the front of the kennel, lying down with a heavy sigh. Luke kept reading, pretending not to notice. The rest of the shelter faded away. Mrs. Randall found them like that at the end of his shift, boy and dog in a silent truce. She shook her head, half amused, half worried. "You're both stubborn as mules," she muttered. "But maybe that's what you both need." That afternoon, as Luke left, he looked back at Chief. The dog's eyes were softer now, less haunted. In that glance, Luke saw something he hadn't felt in a long time: hope, fragile as glass. But the world didn't give second chances easily, and both of them had a long way to go, still. For the first time in a long time, Luke wanted to come back. Not because he had to, but because maybe, just maybe, he and Chief could save each other. The day Chief bit the donor, everything at Pineview changed. It started like any other afternoon at the shelter. Luke had just finished scrubbing out the puppy runs, sweat streaking his face, when Mrs. Randall's voice echoed from the office. "Everyone, front lobby, now!" Something in her tone made even the rowdiest volunteers go silent. Luke dropped his mop and jogged down the hall. The lobby was packed. Shelter staff, a pair of reporters fiddling with their cameras, and a tall woman in a red blazer clutching her bandaged hand and whispering to a man in a suit. That was Mrs. Winthrop, one of Pineview's biggest donors, known for writing checks and demanding attention. Her husband was a city councilman. Luke didn't need anyone to explain what had happened. The looks, the tension, the way Chief was being held on a double leash in the corner, trembling and wide-eyed, told the whole story. Mrs. Randall's face was pale but determined. She spoke quietly to the Winthrops, promising that the shelter would handle the matter with the utmost seriousness. Meanwhile, the local news reporter, always sniffing for drama, whispered, "Demon dog strikes again." Within hours, the story was online. "Demon dog bites donor, shelter's future in jeopardy." Photos of Chief, all teeth and wild eyes, flashed across social media. Angry comments poured in, demanding his immediate euthanasia. Luke scrolled through them that night in his tiny foster bedroom, his chest tightening with each new insult. He recognized the pattern. It was just like the stories written about him a year ago. Thug kid attacks classmate, danger to society. The next morning, Pineview felt like a pressure cooker. Mrs. Randall called Luke into her office, her jaw tight. "Sit," she said, motioning to the battered chair. Luke tried not to fidget, but the air felt heavy, like a storm about to break. She tapped her pen on the desk. "Luke, I know you care about that dog, but this is it. Chief is officially on his last chance. You have 2 weeks to prove to me, the city, and the board that he's safe. If anything else goes wrong, he's done. And," she paused, glancing at him over her glasses, "if you even think about slacking off, you're done too, understood?" Luke nodded, fighting a lump in his throat. What if I can't do it? Mrs. Randall softened just a little. You're not the first lost cause to walk through these doors, kid. Prove everyone wrong. Or at least try. Outside, the shelter was swarming with reporters. One tried to shove a microphone at Luke as he took out the trash. Hey you, the kid with the trouble record. Are you the one working with the killer dog? Luke ducked away, cheeks burning. He wanted to shout back that they were both more than their worst mistakes. But he just kept his head down. Back at his new foster home, things weren't any easier. Janet, his foster mom, was waiting for him at the door. She was a short woman in her 40s, always neat and businesslike. Her son Eli, a small boy of about 9 with big dark eyes, hovered silently behind her, clutching a battered stuffed dog. Janet had read the news, of course. She kept her voice even, but her hands were shaking as she set down the groceries. I saw what happened at the shelter, Luke. I hope you're being careful. I can't risk anything dangerous around Eli. Luke nodded, understanding too well. Foster homes came and went. Trust rarely stayed long enough to grow roots. That night, as rain pattered on the roof, Luke sat at the kitchen table doing his homework. Eli slipped into the room, wordless as always, and sat across from him. He stared at Luke, then down at the dog-eared picture of a German shepherd in his coloring book. Luke thought about Chief, how misunderstood he was, how the world saw only danger. I'm not giving up on him, Luke said quietly. Not sure if he was talking to Eli or himself. The next day at the shelter, Luke begged Mrs. Randall for more time with Chief. Let me try, please. I'll work as late as you'll let me. She hesitated, but finally relented, giving him access after hours, so long as another staffer was always in the building. Luke started staying late, sometimes missing dinner at home. He'd sit cross-legged by Chief's kennel, reading aloud, feeding treats through the mesh, never pushing too hard. Sometimes Chief would bark or snarl, the trauma flashing in his eyes, but slowly, painfully, he started to relax. One evening, Sierra, a new volunteer, watched Luke from down the hall. Why do you even bother? She asked, her voice not unkind, just exhausted. Most people would have given up on a dog like that, or a kid like you. Luke looked at Chief, then at her. Because someone has to. Word spread through the shelter that the trouble kid and the killer dog were inseparable. Some staff whispered that Luke was crazy or doomed to fail. Others watched with guarded hope. The pressure built with every passing day. The shelter's board scheduled an emergency meeting. Donations dropped. Protesters waved signs outside. No more second chances. Save the shelter, not the beast. Janet noticed Luke's exhaustion. At home, he grew quieter, his grades slipping as he spent every waking hour at Pineview. One night, she caught him staring out the window long after Eli had gone to bed. You really think you can save that dog? She asked gently. Luke didn't answer at first. Then, quietly, I have to try, because if nobody ever gave me another chance, I'd be in a cage too, or worse. Janet's expression softened, but fear flickered in her eyes. Be careful, Luke. Some things can't be fixed. But Luke believed differently. Every morning, he returned to Pineview with new resolve. He set up a makeshift training area behind the kennels, researching trauma recovery and gentle training methods late into the night. He found old tennis balls, a knotted rope, anything to tempt Chief out of his shell. One day, as a last-ditch effort, Mrs. Randall let Luke bring Chief outside during the shelter's open day, but only with a muzzle and 2 volunteers ready to intervene. The event was crawling with cameras, everyone eager to see the demon dog slip up. Luke knelt, heart pounding, and called softly, "Come here, Chief. It's okay. I'm right here." At first, Chief froze, trembling, but Luke waited, patient. Slowly, the dog edged forward, sniffed Luke's hand, then sat beside him, leaning his huge head against Luke's shoulder. The crowd murmured, cameras clicked. For a heartbeat, Luke felt hope break through the fear. Afterwards, the news was mixed. Dog still dangerous, but shows surprising bond with teen. Mrs. Randall posted a photo of Luke and Chief on the shelter's website, working for a second chance. Back at home, Janet stared at the photo for a long time. Then she turned to Eli, who sat tracing the outline of Chief's head in his coloring book. "What do you think, honey? Should we let Chief visit us someday?" Eli didn't speak, but for the first time in weeks, he smiled. As the 2-week deadline ticked down, the tension at Pineview was almost unbearable. Every mistake felt magnified. Every moment with Chief could be his last. But Luke refused to quit. If the world wanted a spectacle, they'd get one. Not of failure, but of stubborn hope. He promised Chief, whispered through the bars each night, "I won't give up. Not on you. Not on us." Because sometimes, all it takes to change everything is for one broken soul to believe in another. No one would have believed how quickly summer bled into August at Pineview. The heat still hung thick over the rescue, but inside, something had shifted. It started with small things. Luke found himself arriving before sunrise, slipping quietly past the sleepy staff and sitting on the cold concrete outside Chief's kennel, book in hand, before the rest of the world even woke. Chief watched him day after day, with wary, intelligent eyes. The shelter staff called it a waste of time, but Luke saw something else. A desperate, trembling hope behind the dog's caution. He started bringing stories he'd loved as a little kid, before the world got mean. Tales of dogs who ran wild and free. Heroes who never gave up on the ones everyone else abandoned. Once upon a time, Luke would begin, voice low and steady. Sometimes he just read. Other times he talked. About the stories or about the things that hurt too much to say out loud. About the way people flinch at your name or how it feels when nobody comes home at night except you. Chief listened. Some nights that was enough. It was on a Thursday, right after a thunderstorm, that Luke finally took a risk. He reached through the bars, palm flat, offering Chief a sliver of chicken from his sandwich. The dog shrank back, trembling, tail between his legs, but after a long, breathless minute, he crept forward and nudged Luke's fingers with a cold, wet nose. A tiny moment. But to Luke, it felt like a door cracking open. Slowly, painstakingly, trust began to grow. Luke noticed the patterns. Chief cowered when voices were raised, flinched at the sound of a mop banging against the wall, panicked at anything that sounded like a chain rattling. Luke never moved fast, never shouted. Sometimes he'd sit in silence, just being present. The staff said it was a waste of time, but Luke understood. You can't rush a heart that's been broken too many times. The other kids at the shelter started to notice. Sierra, who volunteered on weekends and always wore headphones to tune out the world, watched Luke from a distance. One afternoon, she slipped him a dog treat and whispered, "You're really getting through to him, you know." Luke shrugged, embarrassed by the praise. I get it. He's scared. Not mean." Sierra looked at Chief, then back at Luke. So are most of us. As the days went on, Luke started opening up to Chief about the parts of himself he tried to hide. About the string of foster homes that all felt temporary. About the dad who disappeared before Luke was old enough to remember his face. About the bruises he learned not to cry about. The teachers who gave up. The friends who drifted away. Chief didn't judge. He just listened, breathing slow and steady in the dark. Some evenings, Luke would rest his forehead against the cool metal bars, feeling the dog's warm breath on his knuckles. "I know you're not bad," he'd whisper. "I know you want to be good." Me too. It took almost a week before Chief let Luke touch him. Just a brush of fur along his shoulder, nothing more. The first time, the dog tensed, eyes wide and wild. But then, slowly, he relaxed, tail thumping once against the floor. Luke grinned, hope flaring up inside him. That small victory was all he needed. The next night, Luke brought a brush and gently worked through the mats in Chief's fur. The dog lay perfectly still, as if terrified the moment would vanish if he moved. Luke talked the whole time, telling stories, confessing fears he'd never shared with anyone else. He realized suddenly that he'd never felt this safe before. Not with any human. Not ever. One afternoon, Janet visited the shelter with Eli. She kept a tight grip on her son's hand, glancing nervously at the runs. Eli's eyes were huge, fixed on Chief, but he didn't pull away. Instead, he crouched outside the kennel and just watched. Chief watched back, quiet and gentle. Janet bit her lip. "Is it safe?" Luke nodded. "He doesn't bite unless he's scared. And he's not scared of Eli. He's never scared of kids." Janet studied the dog for a long moment, then finally knelt beside her son. "You want to say hi, honey?" Eli didn't speak, but he pressed his palm to the chain link. Chief sniffed his hand, then, amazingly, sat down, tail wagging softly. Janet exhaled, the tension in her shoulders melting just a little. Back at home, Luke told Janet about Chief's progress. For the first time, she seemed to listen, not as a foster mom waiting for the next disaster, but as someone who wanted to believe in second chances. "Maybe you're right about him," she admitted one night. "Maybe he's not beyond hope after all." Luke smiled, a small warmth blooming in his chest. "Neither am I." As summer rolled on, the staff at Pineview started to notice the changes, too. Chief no longer barked at everyone who walked by. He'd sit quietly when Luke was near, sometimes pressing his huge head against the bars, as if soaking up the comfort of just not being alone. Mrs. Randall, watching from her office, shook her head in disbelief. "I don't know how you're doing it, Bennett," she muttered, "but keep it up." Then, one night, everything nearly fell apart. A storm rolled in, thunder rattling the windows, lightning casting wild shadows on the walls. The shelter dogs howled and barked, panic echoing down the halls. Chief bolted upright, fur on end, eyes rolling in terror. Luke tried to calm him, but a loud crash, a falling broom, sent Chief lunging back, slamming into the rear of his run. For a moment, Luke thought they'd lose all their progress. But he just sat, quiet and steady, talking softly until Chief stopped shaking. After that, the bond was even stronger, a fragile trust, but real. One evening, after the storm, Sierra brought her guitar to the shelter. She sat beside Luke outside Chief's run, strumming gentle chords. For the first time, Chief wagged his tail, ears perked at the music. Sierra grinned. "He likes it. Maybe he's just a softie." Luke grinned back. "He's got us both fooled." By the end of the 2 weeks, something remarkable had happened. Chief had gone from the dog everyone feared to the one staff would find pressed up against the bars, waiting for Luke's voice, Luke's hand, Luke's stories. For the first time, both boy and dog had a taste of what safety felt like. And both, for the first time in a long while, dared to hope that maybe, just maybe, this new trust would last. Late August brought thunderstorms that rattled windows and flooded ditches along the dusty back roads near Pineview. Luke could always tell when a storm was coming. The dogs grew restless, pacing and whining long before the first thunderclap. Chief was the worst. He'd freeze in his run, his chest heaving with every rumble from the sky, his haunted eyes scanning every shadow as if expecting someone cruel to burst through the door. Luke saw it all and couldn't stop worrying. He'd grown protective, almost fiercely so, and he sensed there was something broken in Chief's past that hadn't yet come to light. The other volunteers gave him wary glances, but he didn't care. Sometimes, Sierra sat with him during the quieter afternoons, the two of them sharing PB&J sandwiches on the curb outside the kennel. Sierra was easy to be around, quiet, observant, always scribbling in a battered notebook when she wasn't cleaning cages. One evening, while the shelter thundered with the noise of a downpour, Sierra approached Luke with a folder in her hand. She sat beside him outside Chief's run and flipped it open. "I did some digging," she said. "You ever wonder where Chief really came from?" Luke stared at the faded paperwork, the handwritten notes, the scraps of old newspaper clippings. The staff said he was a stray, picked up by animal control. Sierra shook her head. "That's what they wrote on the intake form. But look at this." She held up a clipping from a local paper. "Illegal dog fighting ring busted in Denton County." A blurry photo showed battered cages, bloodstains, and, unmistakably, Chief. Ears back, eyes wide, chained in the corner. Luke's hands curled into fists. "They made him fight?" Sierra nodded, her voice low. "I talked to the officer who found him. Said he never attacked the other dogs unless forced. Refused to bite the kids they used as bait. They beat him for it. Sometimes bad." The words made Luke sick. He looked at Chief, curled tightly in the back of his run, trembling as thunder rolled overhead. No wonder he hates loud voices. No wonder he's scared of men. Sierra hesitated. They almost put him down right after the raid, but the officer convinced them to give him a chance. Guess he ended up here. Luke felt the old rage burning in his gut, the kind he'd carried since he was small, since the days when he'd flinched from the crack of a belt or the roar of an argument from the next room. He pressed his palm to the bars, speaking gently. "You survived all that, Chief. You don't have to be scared anymore. Not with us." Chief inched forward, his eyes full of memories neither of them could erase. Luke sat quietly, his own pain echoing in the silence. That night, as the storm howled outside, Mrs. Randall called a staff meeting. She laid out Chief's history on the table, her face grave. "We know more now. He's not a monster. He's a survivor, but..." She looked at each volunteer in turn. "If he bites anyone else, the board will shut us down. We can't risk the whole shelter for one dog, no matter how much he's been through." Luke felt the weight of that threat settle on his shoulders. He left the meeting with Sierra, the two of them silent until they reached the parking lot. "We have to help him," Sierra said. "He deserves better." Luke nodded, jaw set. He's never hurt a kid. Never. Maybe he just needs someone to believe in him. The next day, the rain lingered, and the shelter felt electric with tension. Chief was jumpy, reacting to every little sound. Luke tried to comfort him, reading softly and feeding him bits of chicken. For a while, it seemed to help. But then, a sudden crash of thunder sent Chief spinning, barking wildly, slamming his body against the run door. One of the new staffers, Mark, impatient and rough, rushed in shouting, "Enough! Quiet down!" Before Luke could stop him, Mark yanked the kennel door open, reaching for Chief's collar. Chief panicked, teeth flashing, and bit down hard on Mark's arm. The whole shelter erupted in chaos. Dogs barking, people shouting, Mark cursing as blood trickled down his wrist. Mrs. Randall rushed in, her face white with fear and fury. "Get Luke out of here, now!" Sierra grabbed Luke's arm and pulled him into the hall as staff corralled Chief, who now cowered, ears flat, head hung in shame. The betrayal in the dog's eyes was almost unbearable. Mrs. Randall found Luke in the staff lounge, her voice shaking. "I told you to be careful. I told you we couldn't risk this. I have no choice. You're suspended, effective immediately. Chief is off limits to everyone except trained handlers. If there's one more incident, it's over. For him and maybe for us too." Luke wanted to argue, but the guilt was crushing. He'd tried so hard to save Chief, but it felt like every step forward was followed by a fall. Sierra tried to comfort him, but he shrugged her off, feeling alone all over again. That evening, back at Janet's house, Luke barely spoke. He stared at his untouched dinner, replaying the moment of the bite again and again. Janet sat beside him, her hand gentle on his shoulder. "You can't fix everything," she said quietly. "Sometimes people, and dogs, need time to heal." Eli, who rarely made a sound, slid his coloring book across the table. On the page, he'd drawn a big dog beside a boy, both standing in the rain. Luke stared at the drawing, tears stinging his eyes. He crept out to the porch, rain still pattering on the roof, and let the quiet night surround him. He thought of Chief, broken, battered, misunderstood, and wondered if there was still a way to save him. Or if, like so many times before, the world would just give up and turn away. Meanwhile, at Pineview, Chief huddled alone in his run, each flash of lightning casting new shadows across the walls. The other dogs slept, the staff whispered in the halls, but Chief stayed awake, trembling, waiting for the world to be safe again. And for the first time since he'd come to Pineview, Luke wasn't there to reassure him. The silence was heavier than the storm, but deep down, both Luke and Chief knew they weren't finished yet, not by a long shot. Even if hope felt impossible, even if trust was paper thin, they'd come too far to quit now. Somewhere in the dark, the promise still held, "I'm not giving up on you. Not ever." The day after the storm, Luke could barely sleep. The guilt gnawed at him, crawling under his skin every time he closed his eyes. Pineview felt farther away than ever, his lifeline to hope suddenly cut. The phone call from Mrs. Randall echoed in his memory. "You're suspended, Luke. Please stay away for now." But his mind was still there, wandering the rows of kennels, thinking of Chief, alone and scared in his run. He wondered if the dog understood why he wasn't coming, or if he just felt abandoned all over again. The house was silent. Janet tiptoed around Luke, worried but careful not to push. Eli watched him from the hallway, clutching his stuffed dog, drawing in his notebook, sensing something was wrong even if he couldn't say it. Luke sat by his window, watching the shadows outside grow longer, the distant sky heavy with more summer storms. That night, the wind picked up again, battering the branches against the glass. Luke's phone buzzed, a text from Sierra. "Lights at Pineview. Someone's there after hours. Mrs. Randall's not answering. I'm worried." A chill went down Luke's spine. He tried to convince himself it was nothing, just a storm, or maybe a staff member who forgot to clock out. But the unease wouldn't let him sit still. Janet was in her room. Eli was asleep. Luke slipped on his shoes and hoodie, grabbed his bike and coasted through the darkness, heart pounding with every turn of the wheels. Pineview loomed ahead, the shelter's security lights flickering as thunder rumbled in the distance. From the fence, he saw two unfamiliar vans parked at the far end of the lot. No staff cars, no Mrs. Randall. He crept to the back, pushing his bike behind a dumpster. Shouts drifted through the wind, muffled but sharp. Luke's breath caught. He edged toward the rear entrance, peering through the glass. Inside, the shadowy figures of two men prowled the hallway, flashlights sweeping over cages. One man yanked open a puppy run, shoving terrified pups into a duffel bag while the other kept watch. Luke's blood turned to ice. They're stealing the dogs. He fumbled for his phone, but his hands shook too much to dial. Instead, he forced the back door open, praying it wouldn't squeak. He slipped inside, pressing himself to the wall as the thieves argued over which puppies would fetch the highest price. And then he heard it, a low, furious growl from the kennels. "Chief." The dog must have sensed the intruders. His bark shattered the silence, deep and relentless. The thieves froze, glancing at each other. "Shut that mutt up," one hissed. "If he gets out—" Luke didn't hesitate. He darted down the hallway, flicking on the lights, slamming his hand on the fire alarm. Red strobes flashed and a siren wailed, echoing through the whole shelter. Chaos erupted. Puppies yelped, dogs barked, the thieves cursed and scrambled for the door. One thief doubled back toward Chief's run, fumbling for the lock, maybe thinking the big dog could be worth a fortune in the fighting rings. Chief's hackles rose, lips curling. The man pulled a taser from his pocket, aiming it through the bars. Luke charged, screaming, "Don't touch him!" The thief spun, surprised, and lunged at Luke, grabbing his hoodie and shoving him into the wall. Luke kicked, fighting to break free, yelling at the top of his lungs. He heard the lock snap. The thief had managed to open Chief's kennel in the scuffle, trying to drag the dog out. Chief burst from his run, a blur of muscle and fury, lunging between Luke and the attacker. The man swung the taser wildly, catching Chief on the shoulder. The dog yelped but didn't back down. Instead, he leapt, teeth bared, not to maul, but to drive the thief back, standing protectively over Luke as the second man shouted from the hallway, "Let's go! Leave him!" The first thief tried to scramble away, but Chief cornered him by the mop closet, growling so loud it rattled the glass. Luke, dizzy from adrenaline and fear, crawled to the phone on the wall and dialed 911 with trembling fingers. "Pineview Rescue! Break in! Send help, please!" Within minutes, the police arrived, sirens blaring. The thieves surrendered, faces white with terror, as Chief stood guard, blocking their escape until the officers cuffed them and led them outside. The shelter was chaos. Dogs barking, puppies shaking, volunteers pouring in from the stormy night. The paramedics checked Luke over, dabbing at a cut on his forehead where he'd hit the wall. "You're lucky," one said, voice low. "Could have been a lot worse." Mrs. Randall arrived. Her hair wild, fear etched into every line on her face. "Luke, what happened? How did you—" Luke pointed at Chief, who now slumped beside him, trembling but proud. "He saved me. He saved all of us." The news spread fast. By sunrise, headlines read, "Killer Dog Saves Shelter." Reporters swarmed Pineview, filming Chief as he rested quietly beside Luke, tail wagging weakly. For the first time, the world saw not a monster, but a hero. Cameras caught the moment when Chief gently pressed his nose to a shaking puppy, checking on her as if to make sure she was safe. Sierra was the first to hug Luke, tears in her eyes. "I told you he was special," she whispered. Mrs. Randall wiped her eyes, trying to look stern. "You broke the rules coming here, Bennett. But you may have just saved this place. And Chief," she knelt, stroking the big dog's head, "I think he's earned another chance." Not everyone was convinced. Some neighbors still called for Chief's removal, fearful that his heroism was a fluke. Others pointed to his scars as proof he could never truly be trusted. But something had changed in the air. Where once there had only been fear, there was now doubt, and where there had been doubt, a small, stubborn hope had started to grow. Back at Janet's house, Luke nursed his bruises, telling Eli and Janet the whole story. Eli listened wide-eyed, then wordlessly drew a picture of Chief with a superhero cape, standing tall over the sleeping puppies. Janet hugged Luke tightly. "You risked your life for him," she said, "and he risked his for you." For the first time since his suspension, Luke slept deeply, dreaming not of thunder or cages, but of a dog standing guard over the world, loyal and unafraid. And in the days that followed, as Chief recovered from his wounds and the town buzzed with talk of the shelter dog hero, Pineview became a place of possibilities again. Not just for the animals, but for the people, especially those who'd been counted out before. Because now everyone could see that even the most broken souls might become the bravest. All they needed was a chance, and someone who refused to give up. The news of Chief's heroism spread through the neighborhood and beyond. For the first time, people who had been afraid to set foot inside Pineview showed up with flowers, dog treats, and thank you cards. Reporters returned, not for another scandal, but to get footage of Chief gently nuzzling rescued puppies and sitting, calm and proud, at Luke's side. It wasn't just the outside world that was changing. Inside Pineview, Mrs. Randall saw the tide turning. The board, pressured by a flood of supportive messages and donations, decided to let Chief stay, for now. But there was a new stipulation. Chief could begin supervised visits at Luke's foster home. It was a risk, but Mrs. Randall argued that after everything Chief had done, he deserved a real shot at life beyond the kennels. "Let's see how he does outside," she told Luke. "But you follow every safety rule. Janet has to be on board." Luke was over the moon. He ran all the way home, barely pausing to catch his breath before bursting through the door with the news. Janet froze in the kitchen, dish towel in hand, her face pale. "He's coming here?" she said, her voice thin. Luke nodded, brimming with hope. "Just for visits. Please, Janet. He's not like they say. You'll see." Janet hesitated, her eyes darting to the hallway where Eli sat on the floor, lining up his collection of plastic dinosaurs. I had a bad experience with a big dog when I was a girl, Luke. I'm not sure. He won't hurt you." "Or Eli," Luke said, desperate to convince her. "He's gentle, especially with kids. He's different." Janet pursed her lips, weighing the risk. After a long moment, she gave a tight nod. "Okay, but only with me here, and only for an hour." The first visit was tense. Mrs. Randall arrived with Chief on a sturdy leash and a new collar, his fur still patchy from the shelter scuffles, but his eyes alert and curious. Janet opened the door, stepping aside nervously, as Luke led Chief into the living room. Eli peeked around the corner, his body rigid. Chief saw the boy and, with a gentleness that surprised everyone, lay down on the carpet, lowering his head between his paws. He made no sudden moves, only watched Eli, ears pricked. Eli approached slowly, then dropped to his knees a few feet away, eyes wide. He picked up his stuffed dog, held it out, and after a long silence whispered, "This is Max." Chief lifted his head, sniffed the toy, then nudged it gently back to Eli. The boy smiled, and for the first time since coming to Janet's, looked up and met her eyes. "Can Chief stay?" Janet blinked, tears threatening. "For a little while, honey. Yes." Over the next few days, Chief and Eli grew close. The boy, usually withdrawn and silent, began following Chief everywhere, watching him eat, sitting with him in the backyard, reading his favorite picture books out loud. Chief would rest his head in Eli's lap, calm and protective, a silent guardian. At night, when Eli woke from nightmares, Chief would pad into his room, curl up beside his bed, and the house would finally settle into peace. Luke watched, his chest swelling with something like pride. Janet, too, began to soften, She still moved cautiously around Chief. But each day, her fear faded a little more. Sometimes she'd catch herself smiling at the big dog as he chased butterflies across the grass with Eli or dozed in the sun after a long walk. But not everyone wanted Chief to have his second chance. One afternoon, while Luke and Sierra walked Chief at a nearby park, a battered old pickup truck pulled up along the curb. The engine idled, windows down. A man climbed out, tall, broad-shouldered, with tattoos crawling up his arms and a cruel smile twisting his lips. He stared at Chief, who instantly stiffened, hackles raised. "Look at that," the man sneered. "Didn't expect to see you again, mutt." Luke stepped in front of Chief, heart hammering. "Do you know him?" he asked Sierra quietly. Sierra's eyes widened. I think that's his old owner." The man's gaze flicked to Luke, cold and hard. "That's my dog. You stole him from me. I want him back." Luke's hands curled into fists. "He's not yours anymore. You don't deserve him." The man took a step forward, and Chief growled, a sound deeper and more furious than Luke had ever heard. The man just laughed, ugly and sharp. "You don't know what that dog's worth. He's a fighter. I could make more money off him than you could imagine." Sierra pulled out her phone, snapping a picture. "The police already know who you are," she said, voice shaking but brave. "If you come near him again, we'll press charges." The man spat on the sidewalk and climbed back into his truck. "You'll be sorry," he snarled before peeling away, tires screeching. Luke's heart wouldn't stop pounding. He knelt beside Chief, running a calming hand down the dog's trembling back. "You're safe," he whispered. "He can't hurt you now." But even as he spoke, he knew things weren't truly safe. The encounter left Janet shaken when she heard the story. That night, she double-checked the locks on the doors and windows, peering into the darkness as if she expected trouble to crawl out of the shadows. Chief slept in the hallway, positioned between Eli's room and the front door. For the next few days, everyone was on edge. Luke kept his phone charged at all times. Sierra made sure to walk Chief only in daylight, and Janet kept her pepper spray close at hand. Still, Chief continued to blossom at home. Eli's teachers called to say he was talking more in class, even reading aloud when asked. Janet sat with Luke on the porch one evening, watching Chief chase fireflies in the yard with Eli. "He really is gentle," she murmured. "I was wrong to judge him." Luke smiled, relief pouring through him. "We all deserve another chance. But old threats die hard." Late one night, while Luke was letting Chief out for a final walk, he noticed fresh tire tracks in the alley behind the house. He glanced around, skin prickling, and spotted the same battered truck parked down the street. The man was watching. Luke hurried back inside, heart racing. He pressed his forehead to Chief's, whispering, "I won't let them take you, I promise." Because Chief wasn't just a rescue dog anymore. He was family, and Luke would fight as hard for him as Chief had fought for everyone else. Summer was almost gone, but the heat in Dallas clung stubbornly to everything. Luke lay awake most nights, heart pounding at every unfamiliar sound. He checked the locks before bed, sometimes twice. Janet did the same, her movements sharp and anxious. The battered pickup was spotted circling the neighborhood 3 times that week, its engine rumbling like a warning. At school, Eli drew pictures of Chief as a superhero with a shield. Even he understood that shadows were gathering. But as the days passed, a strange kind of normalcy returned. Luke helped Janet plant fall flowers in the front yard. Eli went back to whispering bedtime stories to Chief, and Sierra came by with new toys for the dog. Mrs. Randall called every few days to check on them, her voice lighter than it had been in months. "He's a legend now, Luke," she said one afternoon, laughing. "There are little kids who want to be chief for Halloween." Still, everyone jumped when the doorbell rang. It happened on a Friday. Janet was home early from work, fixing spaghetti while Luke helped Eli with his reading. Chief lay in the hallway, tail thumping lazily. There was a sudden commotion outside, a crash, then barking from the neighbor's yard. Luke's phone buzzed, a text from Sierra. "Someone's at the shelter. I just saw 2 men break in. One looks like Chief's old owner. I'm calling 911. Luke's blood ran cold. Janet saw his face. "What is it?" she asked. He held up the phone. "Pineview. They're back. Chief's old owner. And the thieves." Janet's face paled. "We need to help." He didn't expect her to say that. For all her nerves, Janet had become fiercely protective since Chief and Eli had bonded. She hurriedly called Mrs. Randall, then grabbed her car keys. "Let's go, Chief, come on," she ordered. Chief sprang up, sensing the urgency, and jumped into the back seat as Eli clung to his favorite book, refusing to stay behind. When they arrived, Pineview was in chaos. The side door was smashed open, lights flickered in the hallway, and barking echoed through every corridor. Sierra was outside, pacing, phone pressed to her ear. "They're inside, 2 of them. The police are on the way, but they're not here yet." Janet's eyes narrowed. "We're going in. I'm not letting anyone hurt my family, or those animals." Luke's heart raced, but her courage gave him strength. Together, with Sierra at their heels and Chief leading the way, they crept through the shattered doorway. Inside, it was a maze of overturned chairs and spilled food. They could hear men's voices in the back. "Get the mutt. He's worth double now. The rest, grab what you can." Chief stopped, nose twitching, and let out a low growl. He pressed himself close to Eli, who gripped his leash tightly but didn't run or scream. Luke crouched beside his foster brother. "Stay with me, buddy. Chief will protect you." The thieves, one of them the scarred ex-owner, the other the same man who'd broken in weeks before, were forcing open kennels, shoving frightened puppies into sacks. Mrs. Randall, barricaded in her office, peeked out. Her eyes widened in relief when she saw Luke. "Thank God you're here." Janet stood her ground, arms wide to shield Eli and Chief. "Stay back!" she shouted at the thieves, voice shaking but strong. "The police are coming. You can't win." Chief sensed the danger, positioning himself between Eli and the approaching men. The ex-owner sneered, brandishing a heavy flashlight. "Move or I'll put the mutt down right now." Luke's voice broke through the noise. "Chief, sit! Stay!" The dog froze, muscles coiled, watching the man's every move. Janet pulled Eli close, refusing to back down even as the thieves advanced. The standoff exploded into chaos. The ex-owner lunged for Chief, swinging the flashlight. Janet yelled, "Don't you dare!" Chief dodged, shoving Eli back with his body, then turned and barked, short, sharp, a signal they'd practiced in their backyard. Mrs. Randall, understanding instantly, hit the alarm button, which sent a piercing shriek through the building. Sierra threw herself at one thief, knocking him sideways. Luke grabbed a broom and swung, forcing the ex-owner back. But it was Chief who turned the tide. He leapt between Eli and the thief, teeth bared but controlled. He didn't attack. He herded. He used his powerful body to block, to corner, to protect. The thief swung again, but Chief dodged, barking, driving the man back toward the kennels. Puppies scattered, but Chief stood over them, refusing to let the men come closer. In the scuffle, Chief took a hard blow to the side. He yelped, stumbled, but kept his stance, eyes never leaving Eli. Janet rushed to Chief's side as Luke and Sierra helped Mrs. Randall out of her office. The police sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder. Cornered, the thieves tried to run, but Chief blocked the hall, using every ounce of his training and instinct to keep the attackers from escaping. The ex-owner, desperate, tried to vault over the kennel gate, but Chief lunged, grabbing his jacket sleeve, holding just long enough for the police to burst in, guns drawn, shouting, "On the ground, now!" The men were arrested, their threats echoing hollow as the officers cuffed them and read them their rights. Chief, sides heaving, collapsed at Eli's feet, licking the boy's hand as if to say, "You're safe now." The aftermath was a blur. Statements to police, reporters swarming the parking lot, paramedics checking Chief for bruises and a nasty gash on his shoulder. Eli refused to leave his side, and even Janet, tears on her cheeks, whispered, "He saved us. He saved us all." Mrs. Randall gathered the shaken volunteers and staff. "Tonight, Pineview stands because of all of you, especially Chief," she said, her voice breaking. "And you, Luke. I'm proud of you. This place, this family, wouldn't exist without your stubborn hope." The next morning, as the sun rose over Pineview, Luke sat on the grass outside Chief's kennel, holding the dog's head in his lap. Eli curled beside them, reading softly from his book, while Janet and Sierra tidied up the last of the broken glass. It was over. Chief had protected everyone, proving again that loyalty was stronger than fear, and that a second chance could turn even the most broken creature into a hero. From that day, no one ever called Chief the demon dog again. He had become, to the community and to his family, something irreplaceable. A protector, a friend, a living symbol of what it means to fight for those you love. And in that quiet morning light, for the first time in his life, Luke believed they'd all finally found a place to belong. Pineview looked different in the days after the attack. The boarded-up windows were replaced with new glass, sunlight streaming through as if nothing bad had ever happened. But those who'd been there knew something deeper had changed too. Where there had been suspicion and fear, now there was admiration and a fierce sense of community pride. Chief was a hero in every sense. The local paper ran his photo on the front page. "Killer dog no more. Chief saves shelter again." People who'd once crossed the street to avoid Pineview now left homemade treats, cards, even thank you banners on the fence. Kids sent drawings of Chief with capes and crowns, calling him the king of second chances. Donations poured in. People adopted dogs just because they wanted to help Chief's friends. But the biggest change happened inside the hearts of the people who'd survived that night. Luke, still sore from the chaos, spent hours sitting with Chief as he healed from his wounds. The gash on Chief's shoulder required stitches and rest, but he never complained. Whenever Eli crept near, Chief's tail would thump, and the boy would curl up next to the big dog, reading picture books or simply laying a gentle hand on his back. For Eli, the silence and nightmares faded. He started saying more, little things at first. "Outside, come Chief, stay." Janet would stand in the hallway, watching her son and the dog, tears shining in her eyes. Janet herself underwent a quiet transformation. The woman who'd once been too afraid to enter a room with Chief now spoke at city council meetings, defending the rights of misunderstood animals. "We all have scars," she told the crowd at one meeting, her voice trembling but strong. "But scars don't mean you can't love, or that you can't be loved in return." Mrs. Randall, once so guarded and practical, launched a brand new program at Pineview. She called it Second Chance, pairing troubled dogs with at-risk teens for supervised training, healing, and friendship. "If Chief and Luke can do it," she said with a rare, broad grin, "so can anyone." The first day of the program, Mrs. Randall gave Luke a volunteer badge, not just as a helper, but as a mentor to new kids coming in. Luke threw himself into the work. Every afternoon, he met with the first group of teens, some with court orders like his own, some just lost in the shuffle of the system. Chief became their mascot, always present, always patient. Kids who wouldn't talk to adults poured their stories into Chief's thick fur, whispered secrets, or just sat quietly while Chief leaned against them, calm and steady. Luke found himself repeating the words that had once seemed impossible. It's okay to trust. It's okay to try again. The days settled into a hopeful rhythm. Chief's strength returned, and so did his playful side. He chased balls in the backyard, splashed in the kiddie pool with Eli, and slept sprawled across the living room rug. Janet cooked bigger dinners, often inviting Sierra and Mrs. Randall to join. Laughter filled the house, the kind of warm, open laughter Luke hadn't heard since he was little. One sunny Saturday, the shelter held an open house for the new Second Chance initiative. The place was packed. Families, city officials, teachers, and even the mayor. Janet stood at the front, sharing her story about fear and forgiveness. If we'd given up on Chief, she said, we'd have missed out on a miracle. Eli, clutching Chief's leash, simply added, Chief's my best friend. Luke was nervous when it was his turn to speak. He looked out at the crowd, at the sea of curious faces, and swallowed hard. I used to think nobody would ever give me a second chance, he said, his voice a little shaky. But Chief did. He taught me how to try again, and to forgive myself for messing up. He showed me that even if you're broken, you can still help somebody else heal. After the speeches, Mrs. Randall unveiled a plaque, in honor of Chief for loyalty, bravery, and teaching us all to believe in second chances. Eli traced the letters with his finger, smiling up at his mother. As the community rallied around Pineview, something else changed. Chief became a symbol, not just for the shelter, but for hope. Schools invited Luke and Chief to visit, sharing their story with classrooms full of wide-eyed kids. Even the police department called, asking Chief to lead the city's annual Pause for a Cause parade. On the day of the parade, Chief wore a red bandana and trotted beside Luke and Eli, the whole city cheering him on. Someone handed Janet a bouquet of daisies, and for the first time in years, she felt truly at home. The changes were small but profound. Eli, once locked inside himself, now spoke in full sentences, asking for bedtime stories, inviting Chief to sleep at the foot of his bed. Janet, whose fear had defined her for so long, was now known for her fierce advocacy and kindness. Luke, who had never been anyone's role model, was trusted to lead, to teach, to believe in himself. But perhaps the greatest healing was Chief's. The dog who'd once cowered in the shadows now greeted everyone with a wag and a gentle nudge. His scars remained, but they no longer told a story of pain. They told a story of survival, loyalty, and love. One evening, as the sun set behind Pineview, Janet sat on the porch, watching Eli and Chief chase fireflies in the yard. She smiled, her heart full, and called to Luke, "You coming, kiddo?" He joined her, watching the family, his family, laugh and run and love, just as any family should. "Thank you," Janet whispered, reaching over to squeeze his hand, "for never giving up on him, or yourself. You both saved us." Luke looked at Chief, then at Janet, his eyes bright with gratitude. "We saved each other." Inside, the shelter buzzed with new volunteers, dogs and kids learning side by side. Outside, Chief and Eli curled together under the stars, safe and content. And for the first time, it felt like hope wasn't just a dream. It was their new reality. The story of Chief, once called a lost cause, was now a legend. And Pineview, once a place of last resorts, had become a beacon, a place where healing wasn't just possible, but inevitable. The months after the attack on Pineview unfolded quietly, in the slow and deliberate way real healing always does. Fall came to Dallas with gentle breezes and golden leaves drifting down into Chief's favorite patch of yard. The rescue thrived. News stories about Chief and the Second Chance program brought a steady stream of volunteers, retirees, students, teachers, parents, each hoping to witness a little bit of the miracle firsthand. For Luke, everything felt changed. Gone was the boy who'd lived with fists clenched and eyes narrowed in suspicion. His days began with breakfast alongside Janet and Eli, Chief always at his feet, and ended with evenings spent at Pineview, guiding new teens through the maze of kennels and lessons of patience. Sometimes, after a long shift, Luke would sit in the quiet of Chief's run, his back against the warm dog's side, talking about the future, or about nothing at all. It was during one of those late evenings, a storm just breaking far off in the distance, that Mrs. Randall invited Luke and Chief to a support group she'd started for troubled youth. The room was small, tucked into the back of a church, filled with folding chairs and stories of pain. Luke was nervous, but Chief padded in beside him, tail wagging, head high. When it was Luke's turn to speak, he glanced down at the scarred German shepherd at his side and found the words coming easily. "When I first met Chief, I thought I was saving him. But the truth is, he saved me." He looked around at the other kids, some blinking back tears, others just staring, silent and hungry for hope. "I had to learn that building trust isn't easy. It takes patience, and sometimes you fail. There were days I wanted to give up, but Chief never did. Not on me. Not on anyone." He explained how the process was slow and uneven. There were good days, like when Chief let Eli hug him for the first time, and bad days, like the night of the thunderstorm when everything almost fell apart again. But I kept coming back, and so did he. We learned to forgive ourselves and each other, over and over. Around Pineview, Chief's transformation became legend. Once terrified of adults, he now gently approached anyone who entered, offering a soft nose or a nudge. With kids, he was a revelation. Never flinching, always patient. There was a boy named Daniel, new to foster care, who used to have angry outbursts every day. After just a week reading to Chief, Daniel's tantrums faded. Soon he was laughing, stroking Chief's fur and whispering secrets he wouldn't tell anyone else. Eli's progress amazed everyone. He had gone from silence and isolation to chattering away with Janet, Luke, and his teachers. He read books to Chief, sometimes even correcting the dog's listening posture with a giggle. "Sit up, Chief. This part is important." Sometimes at bedtime, Eli would curl up next to Chief and talk about his day, voice soft and full of hope. Janet changed too, though her transformation was less obvious from the outside. She was no longer just the worried foster mom. She was fierce, loving, and outspoken. She volunteered at the shelter, wrote letters to lawmakers, and, most important, advocated for both kids and dogs who others saw as too broken. She told her own story of fear and forgiveness, admitting to the world how Chief and Luke taught her to love without reservation. At Pineview, the Second Chance program flourished. Kids who'd never believed in themselves learned to teach, to care, to hope. Sierra, once shy and withdrawn, was now Mrs. Randall's right hand, organizing events and training volunteers. There were so many moments, small, profound, and hard-won, that marked the shelter's new life. A boy who stopped fighting at school, a dog who finally wagged his tail for a stranger, a mother who trusted her son with a leash and a prayer. Luke and Sierra started visiting local schools, invited to share their story with students who struggled. Sometimes, they'd bring Chief along, letting him pad through classrooms full of wide-eyed kids. Luke talked about mistakes, about running from help, about being angry, about feeling like a lost cause. "If you ever feel like you don't matter," he'd say, "just remember, even a dog with scars can save the day. Even a kid who messed up can become a hero." It was in those visits that Luke truly understood what Mrs. Randall meant about the ripple effect of compassion. Every small act, sitting quietly with a frightened dog, listening to a foster sibling's fear, standing up for someone nobody believed in, could change a life. Sometimes it was a stranger's kindness. Sometimes it was a hard-won apology. But every time it was real and it mattered. One afternoon, Luke found himself sitting with Janet on the porch, the scent of cut grass thick in the air. Chief dozed at their feet, Eli building a fort out of cardboard boxes nearby. Janet glanced at Luke, her eyes shining with gratitude. "You know, I used to be afraid that broken things couldn't be fixed, that some hurts are just too big. But now I think maybe the bravest thing in the world is to try again, to love anyway." Luke smiled, watching Chief snore and twitch in his sleep. "Yeah, me too." Months slipped by. Birthdays came and went. The holidays brought lights and laughter. Eli got a gold star at school for Most Improved, and Janet baked a cake for Chief's adoption anniversary. Luke, once always on edge, felt himself settling, like a root finally finding good earth. There were still challenges, setbacks, moments when the old fears returned. But now, every time a storm rolled in, Luke knew he wasn't facing it alone. He had Janet, Eli, Sierra, Mrs. Randall, the dogs, and most of all, Chief. The shelter became not just a place to work off hours, but a home. Sitting in another group therapy session one rainy afternoon, Luke looked around the room, at the circle of wounded, hopeful faces, and summed up what Chief had taught him. The broken ones were often the bravest, because we know what it's like to be afraid, and we choose to trust anyway. We choose to come back. He watched Chief, now gently comforting a little girl crying into his fur, and felt pride swell in his chest. Chief's story was his own, and now it belonged to anyone willing to believe. The journey wasn't about fixing everything. It was about showing up, about listening, about choosing again and again to offer forgiveness, patience, and love. It was about finding a family, not by blood, but by who stood by you at your lowest and never gave up. As the sun set, Luke walked home with Chief trotting beside him, Eli skipping ahead on the sidewalk, and Janet waving from the porch. For the first time, he knew with certainty they had all been given a second chance, and together they'd make it count. A year slipped by before anyone realized it. The world at Pineview Rescue was different now, full of the quiet evidence of transformation. Worn leashes on hooks labeled with new names, laughter echoing in the yards, little victories scribbled in chalk on the staff room wall. Eli spoke up in class. "Bruno got adopted. Chief learned to high five." At the heart of it all was the Second Chance program, now thriving. The waiting list grew so long that Mrs. Randall, always organized, had to hire a full-time volunteer coordinator. Dozens of kids came through the doors, some nervous, some angry, some silent, and each was paired with a dog who needed healing as much as they did. Luke, now 16, was no longer the troubled kid in the background. He'd become a mentor, someone other kids looked up to, a bridge between the worlds of pain and hope. Every Monday afternoon, Luke led group sessions in the big training yard, Chief trotting at his side, tail held high. He taught the new volunteers patience, how to wait for trust instead of demanding it, how to listen with more than their ears. He shared his own story, never sugarcoating the mistakes or the tough days, always coming back to the lesson Chief had taught him. Sometimes, saving someone else is how you learn to save yourself. Janet's home, once quiet and a little lonely, was now full of life. She had officially adopted both Luke and Chief, making their family official in the eyes of the law and in their hearts. Eli flourished. His teachers said he was the mayor of the playground, a boy who invited new kids to join every game and never let anyone sit alone at lunch. Janet, once so guarded, became a fierce advocate for kids in foster care and animals in need, speaking at fundraisers and council meetings with Chief sitting calmly beside her. Chief, now with a silver-flecked muzzle and a confidence that filled a room, was a local legend. He became the mascot for Pineview, appearing on flyers, in newspaper stories, and at every major community event. People stopped their cars just to wave or snap a photo as Chief and Luke walked to the park. Strangers sent letters to Pineview. "Thank you for teaching us about second chances. Your story made me adopt an old dog. My son says Chief is his hero." The crowning moment came at the annual community festival, where the whole town gathered to celebrate Pineview and its unlikely heroes. The air buzzed with music, barbecue smoke, and the happy barking of dozens of dogs. At the center stage, Chief was honored with a medal and a hand-carved plaque. Chief, for bravery, loyalty, and reminding us all that no one is beyond saving. As the crowd cheered, Luke stood before them with a microphone, his hands trembling, not with fear, but with pride. He scanned the faces in the audience. Janet, teary-eyed but smiling. Eli bouncing with excitement. Sierra holding up her phone to record. Mrs. Randall grinned from the wings, her sternness melted into warmth. Luke cleared his throat. "When I first came to Pineview, I was angry, scared, and sure that no one would ever give me a real chance. I thought Chief was the same, just another lost cause, but we were both wrong, because someone did believe in us. Chief believed in me, even when I didn't believe in myself. He didn't care about my past, only that I was willing to try again." He looked down at Chief, whose amber eyes shone with trust. Chief's not just a dog. He's a reminder that anyone, no matter how broken or unwanted, can be the bravest, kindest, and most loyal friend you'll ever have, if you give them a chance to belong. Luke's words drifted across the festival, settling into every heart. He saw people hugging their dogs a little tighter, parents squeezing their kids' hands, volunteers wiping their eyes. We built a family here, not because we share blood, but because we showed up for each other. Every act of kindness, every time someone refused to give up, that's what made this possible. He finished quietly. "If you ever doubt your worth, or think someone can't change, just remember Chief. He changed my life. He changed this whole town. And he'll keep changing lives, as long as we keep believing in second chances." The applause was thunderous. Janet wrapped Luke and Eli in a hug, and Chief, medal jingling, leaned into their legs with a happy sigh. Sierra took a photo, capturing the moment. Family and friends, bruised by the world but strong and joyful, gathered around the dog who brought them all together. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the trees, the family returned home. Eli curled up on the porch with Chief, tracing the medal's letters while the big dog snored softly. Luke and Sierra set out new blankets in the shelter's training room for the next group of kids. Janet made lemonade, smiling as she watched her children, once strangers, now inseparable, play in the golden light. And inside Pineview, the legacy lived on. New dogs arrived, scared and scarred, but each was met with gentle voices and the promise of patience. New volunteers struggled, failed, and tried again, learning, like Luke had, that kindness takes courage and that healing can ripple through a community if only one person refuses to give up. Chief's story became a lesson passed from one generation to the next. No one is beyond saving. Not dogs, not kids, not adults. If someone is willing to try, giving a second chance can change a life, a family, a town. Kindness, loyalty, and hope, often carried by those with the deepest scars, are what make a true family. The porch lights glowed in the twilight. Janet joined her family outside, settling beside Chief and Eli. They listened to the crickets and distant music from the fairgrounds, no longer haunted by their pasts, but strengthened by all they'd overcome together. Pineview, once a place of lost causes, had become a beacon, proof that the most unwanted can become the most irreplaceable if only someone refuses to give up. And in the warmth of that ordinary, joyful night, their story wasn't just about rescue. It was about belonging, forgiveness, and the legacy of hope that Chief had left behind.